Welcome back to Solutionary TV. I am your host, always on the ready, Dr. Tatiana, and we are excited again tonight because we are going to be discussing the expansion, the tools, all of these exciting innovations around human evolution, human consciousness, and we have with us a very special guest, Karen Newell of SACRED Acoustics. You may have recalled our wonderful following audience, those of you that support us and have been since we opened up last June, that we've had Dr. Eben Alexander, who also is the co-author of Living in a Mindful Universe. Well, we were hoping to get Karen Newell at that time, and we are really excited and privileged to be able to have her with us this evening because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how SACRED Acoustics came about and how this tool can be used in this transformative work. But let me introduce you by telling you a little bit more about her background. She has always been an innovator in the emerging field of brainwave entrainment, audio meditation. She is the co-founder of SACRED Acoustics and empowers others in their journeys of self-discovery. By using sacred acoustic recordings, she teaches how to connect with your inner guidance, achieve inspiration, I can guarantee that this is true, and improve wellness and develop deeper intuition. Karen has spent a lifetime seeking wisdom through esoteric teachings and firsthand experience exploring realms of consciousness. She empowers others by demonstrating how to connect their inner guidance, achieve inspiration, improve wellness, and she is going to be, or actually just recently was here in North Carolina where she was teaching to a larger group in breakout sessions at the Rhine. I was unfortunately not able to make that, and I'm excited to have her share more about that tonight. But welcome, Karen. We're so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you, Tatiana. It's wonderful to be here to speak with your audience about all of these amazing topics.
Well, let's get to it because quite honestly, I think that there is nothing more exciting than being told that how our brain naturally is entrained in this 3D consciousness and in this soup of technology that all of us are doing everything we can to kind of manage clarity in, to find that we really do have evolving technology that brings us back into empowered states of consciousness, into various brainwave states that are far more open to conducting our energy and our intention and our day-to-day functioning that is calming and meditative and more in a space of clarity, using these tools that are made available to us. So let's just kind of go back to the beginning. You obviously knew that there was something that was driving you towards understanding this. Where did it all start with understanding brain waves and then the next step?
Okay, well, you got to go back all the way to the beginning when I was a child. And I felt a little different than most kids because I didn't really believe what I was being taught in my Methodist religion and also in my secular school about our ancient history. I wasn't satisfied with the answers I was getting to questions like, why are we here? And what is our purpose? And of course, now I realize I wasn't the only person out there not believing what I was learning, but at the time I felt kind of alone, and I wasn't very comfortable discussing things in certain environments because people tried to tell me things that I didn't think were true. Things like in our ancient history, they tell us that we were, those pyramids in Giza fascinated me as a child, the three great pyramids, and we're told that they were built as tombs for pharaohs some many thousand years ago, and they were built by slaves. But they also tell you at the same time that our existing technology today could not duplicate the feat of the engineering that those pyramids display. And so these kinds of things just set me wondering. I also learned in my Methodist church this thing about Jesus. Having to accept Jesus into your heart was what I was told would allow you to go to heaven. And if you didn't do that, then you would go to hell. And as a 7-year-old child, I didn't think this was very fair to all the children in the world who had never heard about this, that they would end up burning in hell for all of eternity. And so I chose not to believe that particular piece of dogma. And I continued being raised in a Methodist environment, went to church camp all of my school age years. But inside, I was rejecting all of that dogma. And I really wanted to know, well, if that's not true, then what is true?
Yeah.
And if that history about the pyramids isn't true, then what is true? So I was kind of on this drive to learn about why we're here and what is our purpose. And as I got a little older, I realized there were a lot of other alternative kinds of resources available. And back then, you know, this was the 70s and 80s, we had libraries and card catalogs that we had to look through. We didn't have the internet with all of this amazing information at our fingertips. And so I would go to the library and look up things. And I became very fascinated by the story of Atlantis. And of course, in school, they tell you this is a myth, but this ringed true to me. And this allowed for those pyramids to have been built by an ancient society who did have technology that we had basically forgotten. And so this became a fascination of mine. And roundabout in the early 90s, a book by Graham Hancock came out called Fingerprints of the Gods. And finally, I thought, someone is taking this evidence in our world, all of these sacred sites around the world that nobody can really explain how many of them got there. Graham Hancock was finally kind of putting evidence together in a new, fresh way, different from traditional archaeologists. And it was very refreshing to see someone finally addressing topics that had fascinated me forever. And sacred sites have always been a very big interest of mine. I knew from all of that evidence that our ancient culture must be much older than it is. Now, as time went by, I started doing a lot more of this alternative reading, things like the Kabbalah, theosophical texts, ancient Vedic texts. All of these texts had some things in common. And those were the things that I was interested in, the things that all of these different traditions were saying. Those to me were the universal truths. And one of those universal truths is that all of us have an ability to connect to this greater, grander consciousness, bigger than what we realize right here in our limited brain and body. And this intrigued me as well. So I learned that through practice and certain techniques that I could become telepathic or, you know, have an out-of-body experience, things like this. And so I set upon a quest, and I had a daughter in my early 20s. And so it was round about when she was in her teenage years, when it was a little easier to make time for this. I had a busy job at a publishing company where I was a director of information technology, a web developer, a project manager. I managed the entire design department. So I was a very busy person, but on the side, I was exploring these kinds of things. And I very quickly learned when I started taking workshops and trying to get hands-on experience with exploring within consciousness, that you really had to have the kind of basic meditative skills in quieting the mind, skills in sitting and allowing yourself to settle the distracting thoughts in order to really reach those grander states of consciousness. Nearly every practice that I wanted to learn had this at its core in some fashion. So I was taking classes in Reiki, in Feng Shui, in healing touch for animals, animal communication, how to use crystals for healing, how to do all kinds of things with energy. And this meditative skill was not so simple for me. Now, I had come up all my whole life teaching myself all kinds of different skills, but this one was much more challenging. It was very, very hard to settle that racing mind in my head. Every time I would sit down to try to meditate, those thoughts would begin, worries about yesterday, anxieties about tomorrow, conversations I wanted to have, or even just mundane lists of projects that I was working on.
Mm-hmm.
I was very frustrated when it came to meditation. I would sit for about 5 minutes with my eyes closed, and I would challenge myself to sit for 10 minutes. And then when I would open my eyes and realize only 3 or 4 minutes had gone by, I thought, I just can't do this.
Agonizing,
And
yes.
yet I continued. And that is when I discovered sound.
Mm.
So a very particular type of sound. First, it was gongs or tuning forks or crystal bowls, Tibetan brass bowls. Those kinds of sounds have this special kind of monotonous quality, but with a little wavering sound. And that really helped me kind of get into a trance state much more easily. And that's when I discovered brainwave entrainment technology had even an extra little edge. And this is where some magic started to happen. Now, there was another thing we can get into a bit later. It was not only sound, but attention and awareness of the heart, of the heart center, that made a big difference in my ability to quiet the mind. But the sound took me on a quest. Of course, I started taking workshops again. I started buying up all kinds of CDs of different manufacturers who used brainwave entrainment technology. My screen has frozen.
You're actually coming through just fine on our end, so please feel free to continue. Yep, you're good.
Yes. So as I started going to these different workshops, I realized that this type of technology was absolutely amazing at helping me getting into more expanded states of awareness. My mind was able to quiet. I was able to really reach my inner child, my inner fears, my inner everything. And I was able to really align with who I really am. But it didn't start out so easy. Along the way in these workshops that I attended, I met this man named Kevin Causey. Now, he's a born and bred Manhattanite. He was born in New York City and continues to live there. He is a mechanical and electrical engineer. He had out-of-body experiences as a child, though. So while he was very much in the material world, running his own business, really inventive, he's building an airplane in a Manhattan loft. He doesn't trust anyone else to build the airplane that he's going to fly eventually. He created his own biodiesel fuel plant right there in Manhattan to use as fuel for all the vans and trucks he has for his engineering business. So he's very inventive. And when I met him, he said that he wanted to create his own binaural beats. He had had a near-death experience, a very small, maybe 5 or 10 minute near-death experience, but he touched the other side and he thought he could go back. He remembered the out-of-body experiences he had as a child, and he thought he could start to recapture that. But just like his plane, he wanted to create his own sound. And so when I met him, at that point, I had amassed a very large library of different types of brainwave entrainment. And I said to him, well, hey, I would love to hear what you make when you're ready to make it available. And he got wind of my big library of audio files and thought maybe we could work together. And so we did. I started finding some of my favorites off of the recordings I already had. And since both of us were highly technical, I was in Baltimore at the time, he was in Manhattan, and we would just get on Skype, kind of like we are now. We'd share a Skype screen, and we started analyzing all of those different brainwave entrainment audio recordings. And we realized, at least he realized, that he could make his own, our own. And that is when our collaboration really began. And so we would work together to analyze the different recordings. And I will give Kevin the credit for getting together all of the audio editing software and learning how to do all of that. But we worked on these together, and he would create different recordings kind of based on our interests. So I had taken courses in remote viewing. I knew we could transcend space and time. And as I said earlier, I was very interested in how those pyramids were built. And so one of the things Kevin and I did was we created sounds to allow us to travel with our awareness back in time to see how those pyramids were built. He was very interested in other planets and extraterrestrials. And of course, I knew that sacred sites around the world were very often aligned with different planets, and that often gave kind of clues as to what those sites were there for. So we started using NASA space sounds created by Jeffrey Thompson. We kind of repurposed them for our own use and visited the energy of Jupiter and Saturn and so on. Now, none of those recordings are what we use now. This was just in our practice state. And what we would do is Kevin would create a new recording and make it available to me. And then we would schedule ourselves just by texting to each other. And we would do an exercise, a recording at the same time. We called them sound journeys, not meditation. It was much easier to use sound journey than the word meditation. And we weren't really meditating. We actually were journeying. And so after each journey, we would get on the phone and tell each other what just happened. And Kevin and I had very different styles of exploring these realms. He was very visual. He was very experienced at getting out of his body, and he would talk about zipping off his ethereal suit and zipping it back on. And I had a much different experience. I was more feeling things and knowing things. I was a little bit less sure of myself that I was picking up information that was useful. But because Kevin and I did this together on a very frequent basis, we were able to start validating information that each of us would pick up. And this was invaluable in building my own confidence as to what was happening out there that seemed so, or in there, right? That's so different than the material world, and yet somehow real, somehow another part of us. And this is really where it all began.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so much that you covered there. I first want to thank you for staying in that bumper sticker mindset of question authority. Do you remember seeing that back in the 80s and 90s? That caught my attention in the exact same way. It was as if I knew if I could just pull the veil down, I would get a real view of what we were dealing with, because we have triggers, don't we? Karen, we have triggers that tell us things aren't quite right. We're given a history, we're given a dogma, we're given a philosophy, and everything that you've said from the pyramids to Atlantis and studying on down, differences. You know, you were busy in the IT world, and I'm rotating, giving birth and nursing 4 children and reading 8 books at a time and staying up till 4 in the morning. But there's this inner pull that says I need to not only integrate what I'm reading, I need to get going with bringing this into a relevant place that's useful in my life. And I'm profoundly grateful to you and Kevin for taking it to the next step, because these are tools that not only help us journey, as you said, meditation has a place, but journeying, I think, is a completely different experience. It is more lucid. It is a clear space that you can direct your intention into. I think it incorporates that remote viewing astral projection component that you were talking about. And I know that as a near-death experiencer that Kevin happens to be, and when Dr. Emmett Alexander was talking about where he was able to go using these tools, it's very clear that they are helping us realign vibrationally with a universe that is looking for us to find that frequency so that we can go into those fields that we're really directed and interested in. And as you were saying about these sacred sites, there's so much more understanding, whether it be, you know, Graham Hancock or some of the other really beautiful ancient site historians. We understand that they were built to hold a certain acoustic resonance. Isn't that also correct? Has that been part of your study as well, Karen, when you were going into how to use this?
Yes. When Kevin and I started this work, of course, sacred sites was one of my initial motivations for all of this, and thus SACRED became part of our company name for that very reason. But yes, we learned that the PAIR research group out of New Jersey, I don't believe they're together anymore. That was the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. They did work at sacred sites all around the world. I think they found 3 or 4 in particular that they focused on. And they found that the resonance there was roughly 110 hertz, somewhere in there, like 95 to 115, something like that. And these were in man-made structures. around the world, and yet they were all tuned to the same frequency. So Kevin and I, when we found this research, we were busy trying to figure out what frequency our different ohm sound would be. And lo and behold, the male ohm sound is roughly in that same range. And so that was very fascinating to us. And we made some suppositions that perhaps shaman type people, spiritual leaders and others, were using these sites in part to access these realms.
I actually have a lot of confidence that that's exactly true, having done enough journey work with shamans and going on retreat and working with plant medicine, and again, in a very, very sacred set and setting and understanding. Sound is always incorporated, isn't it, Karen?
Yes, it is. Shamans especially love using those drums. And very interestingly, Kevin was down in Peru. He went to Machu Picchu and did some work down there. And while he was there, he participated in a shamanic ceremony where they played conch shells. So the group of people was in a circle in the center. There was a shaman on either side, each playing a conch shell. Now, Kevin, being who he is, he recorded that session with permission. And he also, at the same time, was taking his own brainwaves during the ceremony with a portable EEG device that we had acquired. And what he learned when he got home and analyzed that sound is that those shamans were playing a binaural beat. Now, a binaural beat is part of what goes into the brainwave entrainment recordings. And I guess that may be what you want to hear about next, a little bit about that.
Well, yes, I absolutely do. I don't think that our entire audience understands the difference between, because it's new. We were not raised, this wasn't part of our academic education. Brainwave states, I mean, they only recently determined that gamma is actually a state that is achievable, and it's a very, very highly actualized and spiritually in tune space that is something that only Tibetan monks and those that have meditated for years have been capable of, and now we can really create inductive states for those. But let's talk a little bit about binaural beats and Hemisync. Not everyone understands old reptilian brain. We want to get into pineal gland, up into prefrontal cortex. Can you talk about the science just a little bit for our viewers, Karen?
Yes.
Okay.
Binaural beats were originally discovered by a man named Dove back in the 1800s. And then more recently, the work of Bob Monroe kind of rediscovered them, and he realized that these types of sounds could help people in his context, help people have out-of-body experiences. This was back in the 70s. So a binaural beat is basically when you hear one frequency in one ear and a different frequency in the other ear. And it's the difference between the two frequencies that causes the brainwave entrainment. So for example, if you have a 100 hertz signal in this ear, a 104 signal hertz in this ear, the difference is 4 hertz. Now, 4 hertz is interesting because it is the state between delta and theta. So delta is the state that we're in when we're in very deep sleep. This is 0 to 4 hertz as measured on an EEG. That's the electric signal coming out of the brain in cycles per second. And interestingly, sound is measured the same way because it's a wave.
Right.
So this electric signal coming out of the brain produces 0 to 4 hertz when we're sleeping. That's the delta state. Up from that, 4 to 7 or 8 hertz is the theta state of awareness. And 7 to roughly 12 hertz is the alpha state. Now, theta is a very deep meditative state. That's the state they found that all those Tibetan monks were in when they would go to meditate very easily. They could maintain a theta state of awareness. Alpha is a little more active than that, but still a very focused and relaxed state. Many of us may get into alpha brain waves when we're studying, when we're very relaxed, when we're very focused on a particular thing. 12 to roughly 30 hertz is the beta state of awareness. That's the state we're in when we're thinking, when we're analyzing, when we're talking. Above 30 hertz is that gamma state that you're speaking of. And they've even, identified lambda and some other ones up there. But
oh, exciting.
30, they have. And 30 plus, though, roughly we'll just say is gamma. So it's that beta state. That's the state with our racing mind, with our anxieties, with our worries. That's the state that many of us, including myself, have so much trouble getting out of into those quieter states. So 4 hertz is that state between delta and theta, between awake and asleep, the hypnagogic state. We are all in the hypnagogic state every single day when we first fall asleep at night. And when we first wake up in the morning, it's a similar state, but they call it the hypnopompic state. But we all know what that feels like when our body is profoundly relaxed, but our awareness is what we notice. And when we're first waking up in the morning, we might be remembering some dream fragments. Maybe if we're not in our bed, we might be realizing, where am I? You know, if you're in a hotel or someone else's home, that state, that's the state, the exact state that we are trying to induce when we create these different frequencies. And so it's not just a matter, there's a lot of free YouTube videos. There's a lot of free apps out there, and on YouTube they have them as well. But on the apps, they say, oh yes, free binaural beats. And yes, of course you can get one of those apps and you can get a 4 hertz signal played for you and know what that feels like. But our recordings go a little bit further than that. We learned very quickly that getting into a delta state can help you fall asleep. But if you want to have a more expanded state of awareness, it's useful to also have a little theta or alpha, or even sometimes that low beta. So we have, through our trial and error and taking EEG measurements as well of people who are in these states, and then of course listening with an EEG to see if we're actually achieving those states, we've created I would say very complex formulas of different harmonic frequencies and put them all together in ways that really create a sound that you really haven't heard anywhere except in Sacred Acoustics. Now, you mentioned Hemisync. That is the work out of the Monroe Institute, strictly binaural beats. That is one of the many brainwave entrainment technologies that we analyze. So we know how they're all put together. Anyone can do this using an audio analysis tools. And ours, we actually are doing more than just binaural beats. We figured out that, or Kevin actually figured out, that if he included monaural beats, that's where you're hearing the same sound in each ear. He created a very special proprietary way of combining monaural and binaural beats. We call it neural helix. Hemisync is the brand name for the binaural beats of Monroe Institute, and Sacred Acoustics, we call ours neural helix, just to differentiate that there is something different going on there. And it's interesting because when we first started applying harmonic principles, we didn't at first because nobody else was, but we decided one day to try that. And when we did that, everything changed. We had a group of testers that would listen to our recordings, and when they first started listening to the harmonic versions, we didn't tell them anything was different, but they started saying things like, oh wow, this music, what is this music you've created? I missed the tones, because they were used to hearing that very strong wah, wah, wah. Now that sound can be challenging for a lot of people to listen to, and so many early binaural beat producers would add rain or surf or some kind of water and other types of sounds that would soften that digital effect. But we found when we would create them using harmonic frequencies that we didn't have as much of an issue with that. And so we aren't really needing to mask our sounds. Now, we do add other types of sound, all with an entraining effect. Every single sound we add must be harmonic to everything else in the recording. And so now we really are no longer, Kevin is no longer simply an audio engineer. He's actually a composer.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And he continues to develop new techniques to bring more power, to bring more success for people who wish to use them for all kinds of different reasons. That hypnagogic state allows us to access creative inspiration, allows us to access our intuitive space, allows us to connect with the souls of departed loved ones, to journey through space and time with our awareness. It's really just the sky's the limit. That hypnagogic state is a kind of magic state of learning. Some people use them just to study. Evan Alexander's older son, who's in medical school, listened to our whole theta, a 10-minute loop 1,600 times while he was studying for the medical board exams, and did amazingly well for him compared to how he had done previously on standard tests. So a lot of applications for these sounds.
You know, and I really appreciate, Karen, that you touched on the fact that there are those that are putting recordings on YouTube, and there's free apps and downloads. And I've had others say to me, because I'm a huge proponent of sacred acoustics, having sampled it and been working with it for a few years now, as a deep meditator, as a teacher of energy and medical intuition, and a huge proponent, again, of this human evolutionary state that we're all going through. It is time to reclaim these faculties. We have this quote unquote junk DNA that's coming together. We have the vibratory frequency and shamanic resonance of the earth coming up, and we need to recalibrate with it. And we are dealing with a soup of toxic, you know, technological wave and frequency that we really need to keep on top of and be aware of. Otherwise, we are going to end up feeling swayed or victimized by something that we can't quite, you know, get a handle or touch upon. And so wave and frequency is the nature of the universe. It is the nature with which we are created. If we have these tools, it's exciting to use them. There is no question in my mind when I have used other tools that have been a quick download as opposed to working with sacred acoustics, I always go deeper. And I don't mind having our audience know, Karen, I love my happy place. And my happy place is a beautiful, I think it's about 5.5 by 5.5 feet copper pyramid in a room that's dedicated to meditation. And I've got my Beats, my headset, I put it on, and my own intuition tells me, is it time for some sweet sacred lullaby? Do I want to hear that beautiful celestial maternal sound of a mother cooing to her child with the sounds that, you know, kind of sound like rain coming through? And do I need that kind of a cellular intelligent soothing on my being? Do I just need to check out into Delta and find myself in a very calm, very, very relaxed and almost absent state of consciousness, which a lot of us need with the monkey mind, beta, 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 beta all the time? Or, you know, am I ready to get into some, you know, event horizon kind of energy and just dive right into the cosmos and start traveling in an astral projection and a lot of lucid, you know, creative dream time to get some answers to what's going on with the world right now and where are we in this great year? And I can attest that Sacred Acoustics can give you the exact vehicle to what it is that you're looking to do. And I want our listeners to know, everyone that's listening tonight, Karen Newell was very kind, her and Kevin, to put together a bundle called the Ascension Bundle. So many are paying attention to what's going on with the world right now. We are recognizing that we are headed in a technological age that looks a lot like transhumanism. It looks a lot like losing some of our humanity and being just caught up in less spirituality and more emphasis on where we've gone technologically. And there is a whole other camp that is recognizing that this is an opportunity for us to evolve, because we do understand that we are frequency, that we do understand that it is the nature of the universe to be finding resonance and harmony and compassion and love. And the recordings that we are working with and that you keep evolving right now, my very most favorite is getting into the heart space and getting into that golden light, because I feel that with heart math and all the work that's being done right now, Greg Braden's doing a lot of work on heart resonance. These recordings are even helping us get these torus fields going in our hearts to be able to get into a whole new level of heart consciousness. Isn't that right, Karen? Talk a little bit more about what you're doing with these new recordings.
Yeah, that is right. And it's interesting because it is very possible to just put the headphones on and wait to see what happens. And that's a great thing to do if you're just starting out, get a feel for them. But when you can actively use your intention, you're placing your attention on a particular intention while you're listening, that's when you can really start to say, so you rattled off all kinds of different things. And the heart is absolutely another key for me. At first, it was a very useful tool, like I said, with the sound to help quiet the mind. Because I realized when I would move my awareness to my heart, that the heart has no linguistic center. There's no words there. It's a feeling state. And so I learned a lot about heart math, as you said, just very quickly, that torus field that expands and contracts from our heart absolutely fascinated me. And many people they tell you that our heart field is actually affecting the people around us. And when I learned about this, many people I know who also learned about it were very concerned about protecting themselves from other people's heart fields, because there's a lot of it's our emotional state that travels through this electromagnetic field, and a field like love, joy, and happiness. Of course, we all would want to be affected by that, but
Right.
a field of sadness, depression, anger, or greed, or maybe even something evil or worse going on, we don't want to be affected by that. And so I learned that by holding my own heart in a certain fashion, that I could not only protect myself from any of those kinds of energies, but I could also ultimately only affect people with positive types of energy. And I call this the ultimate golden rule, the idea that we should only treat others as we treat ourselves. And
Right.
so something that's happening automatically without me realizing, I wanted to make sure that I could clear out my own kind of negative heart energy. Now, when you first start placing attention on the heart, I started a Sufi heart rhythm meditation practice. And when I did this and started placing attention there, the first thing that happened was not finding the quiet space inside. It was finding all of my stored emotional pain and trauma
Mm-hmm.
from over the years, because in our Western culture, we haven't really learned so well how to process our emotions. We learn how to put them away.
Mm-hmm.
We learn how crying is not good, at least out in public, and showing emotion is a sign of weakness. This is kind of a symptom of being in a very masculine centered culture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say male dominated, I want to say masculine energy. So
Mm-hmm.
masculine energy is very much focused on the external world. Feminine energy is very much focused on the internal world. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is a world that's out of balance, one that is mostly focused on the external. And part of this big change, I think, that's coming to our world is bringing more of those feminine principles, the internal awareness, the intuitive sense back into our daily lives. And certainly acknowledging our emotions is a huge part of that. And so learning how to process them by going into the heart, kind of triggering them, the sounds and attention to the heart together have this kind of magic formula of activating whatever's already in your energetic system. And for
Mm-hmm.
many of us, that is those stored emotions. And so when this would happen to me at first, when I would combine those two kinds of techniques, I would get very emotional. And I realized after a while that these were all beautiful opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
release stored emotion. And so I did. I released lots of stored emotion. And this is it's challenging sometimes to uncover those kinds of energetic things. And the sound and attention to the heart together did that for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized after clearing a lot of that, that it then gets replaced. You start to align with that part of you you're not as familiar with. That greater part of you, that more authentic part of you comes more to the forefront. And
Mm-hmm.
you do start to realize who you truly are. At least I did. And so I started to be able to answer those questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? And you do that by going within and getting more aligned. Now, these heart-centered recordings that Tatiana is speaking of are very useful at bringing that attention to the heart. Heart center is one where we breathe. The visualization is to breathe out into that torus field and really to an unlimited, beyond earth type of fashion. And heart presence actually takes all of the different breathing techniques that I learned from that Sufi heart rhythm meditation and puts them into four short 20-minute recordings. Now, the beauty of these heart breathing exercises, it's simply imagining that you're breathing in and out of your heart in different ways. The beauty of these is that they can be done in a meditative state while listening to the recordings, but you can also take it out into the world when you don't have your headphones and your player with you. And so I am very often in meetings, or maybe if I'm just stuck in traffic, or if I'm in a tense situation, I will start doing that breathing exercise where I breathe in and out of my heart into this bubble around my body, the electromagnetic field of the heart. I am consciously breathing in and then back, out and then in, over and over again into this bubble around my body. And knowing that it affects the people around me, I do notice that in certain tense situations, just that act alone will start to calm people down around me. So this is something that all of us can learn how to use in our daily lives, not just in that meditative state. Now we're working on a new recording that I'm very excited about, and it's called Love Body.
Ooh.
We have Light Body, and that's where some of your listeners may be aware of the Merkaba or the star tetrahedron that's around our bodies. And the Light Body recording helps us to kind of, not necessarily the star tetrahedron fashion, but starts to help us activate that light that's around our body. I learned that it's a light vehicle, and that's what we kind of travel around with in our awareness, potentially as an orb of light. But that aside, Love Body is I got very excited because I talk about love a lot. And Evan and I, when we're giving our presentations, he talks about the amazing force of unconditional love that he touched during his near-death experience. Now, many near-death experiencers talk about this, and a lot of them will say, Kevin being one of them, that you cannot bring that love back here. And I beg to differ, because I've touched some rather amazing unconditional love force in my own meditative experiences. And I've met other people through our travels who have touched that same love. And so my goal has always been to tap into that love and to bring it into my body. And I do it by imagining that that love is entering the top of my head through the crown chakra, just the top of the head. You don't even have to know what a chakra is to do this. Golden light actually is the precursor to this, where we bring, you mentioned golden light, where we bring, our visualization is to bring the liquid golden light of the sun into the body. Imagine it going into the heart and then circulating as a million sparkles of diamonds going through your body to bring that light into your system. But Love Body will bring a beam of love into your body, and it will guide you to recall a person or animal or place that you love inside your own being, to bring that spark of love that we're all made of from within, to make it brighter, and then actually bring that beam of love from source directly through the top of your head into your body, and actually learn how to become more love and how to radiate that to the world, whether they realize or not. That's what you're doing. This is something I feel could potentially really bring really play a role in bringing humanity to another level. Many people talk about love being the most important thing in the universe. We've all heard this. We've all heard how love is the most important thing. The Beatles said it. Everyone says it, but it's talk. I never learned as a child how to embody love. I never learned as a child how to truly love myself by becoming the love that I am. It was all a head game. Love was a mental exercise, how to behave a certain way, how to think a certain way. And now I've learned how to feel love, how to be love, how to embody that binding force of love that connects us all. And I feel like if as children, in public school here in the US, we all put our hands on our heart and we say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. What if we all put our hands on our heart and felt that love from within, felt the compassion for all of our fellow human beings, felt the compassion for ourselves, felt the love that all of us are made of? What if as children we all learned how to do that? And so as we got older, as we became mothers, fathers, construction workers, government workers, congressmen, CEOs of companies, and that was still part of our daily knowing, is to go within and feel that heart resonance. That is how our world can truly change, by really becoming that love, each and every one of us. And so that is part of my personal mission, is to bring that sense of love to every person on the planet and know that we're all connected. No soul left behind is something that Evan and I often say, because everyone is part of this plan. Everyone on the planet is part of this. And we are all connected, and there is no way to not be involved. It doesn't matter your belief system. Belief systems are, they do a good job of separating us. they do a good job of making us feel like we're different from each other, and they've caused a lot of wars
They
between.
have. The dogma has a tendency to separate us, doesn't it, Karen? And I want to touch on some of the science that's come out that is absolutely beautifully married with what you're talking about in being able to create that mind and heart coherence that Heart Math speaks to, and that Greg Braden's been doing a lot of work on with his show on Gaia. Missing links, and that David Wilcock recently touched on in Wisdom Teachings. There has been very solid and very well reported and published science that when there is a coherence, when that energy through the breath, engaging in and bringing that golden light down into the body, down through the crown, just as you've described, it's a gorgeous technique, and it starts to fill up that heart torus, that there has been able to be a measured and well-documented difference when the individuals holding that resonance project their focus of that love torus, that heart torus, that really healthy, broad, expansive place to another individual at a specific target point. You know, they really, like a laser focus, they've been able to look at the DNA of the individual and demonstrate that it can actually go into a reparative state when that love is projected directly at them. And subsequently, the same is true if an angry heart, if a turbulent heart and intention and focus is being projected on someone. So we're starting to understand, and your tools are such a gorgeous complement to this, that everything we think and feel, because there's always a correspondent emotion to whatever our thoughts happen to be, especially those habituated ones, correct? That it's a blessing or it's a curse. It is either a gift of love or it is something that is tearing away or depreciative to those that we are thinking and feeling towards, particularly ourselves. And so getting into that intelligent coherence and knowing how to feel into that space that actually creates a generous heart torus and a healthy fluid breath is such a profound gift to create for oneself. And these tools that you have created, you and Kevin have created and have been promoting, really can assist one in steadying the breath, getting the visualization if they want to go with the auditory visualization. I kind of prefer to go with the nonverbal because that's just my style, but I love that you offer both of those. Have you been getting some really good feedback about what some of your clientele has been experiencing as you've been evolving a lot of the heart torus tools?
Yeah, we just get amazing feedback. It never continues to amaze me. But yes, speaking of the verbally guided versions and the non-verbally guided versions, we do know that many people don't want to hear any words. And in fact, that's what we hope that most people will eventually get to. But we provide all of our recordings with a verbal and a non-verbal version. Mm-hmm. Now, some come with no words at all, but those that have words, we always include one with no words at all. We recommend that at least once that people listen to the verbally guided version just to see, you know, what our intention was for the different creation. But we always encourage everyone to do this in a fashion that works best for them. We know that everyone is unique and has different ways of utilizing the recordings. We have one guy who, he was recovering from a stroke. He could get around, but he had some limited movement on part of his body. And he would listen to, I believe it was Light Body, on very low volume all throughout the day. And he found that it helped him so much with his physical symptoms, and he felt so good. But now we don't direct people to listen while they're doing other activities at low volumes, but we encourage people to experiment in that kind of fashion, because we, you know, when I would take all those different classes that I took, very often the teachers would say, you must do it this way, or you're doing it wrong. And so if it didn't work that way for me, and I didn't have, you know, the light come up in my head like they said it was supposed to, I just felt inadequate. And so our approach is to really give some basic guidelines and then allow people to adapt the recordings to their own personal kind of preference.
Can I segue in on that, Karen? Because you just touched something so powerful. We need to be listening to our own guidance, and we need to be recognizing our style is going to be different from others. And that's the beautiful individuation that we all have. The tools can take us at the levels that we're ready. It's kind of like if you build it, we're going to get on board with it. We're going to use it, and we're going to use it at a pace that's friendly for us. But you mentioned something that I really want our viewers to be listening to. we're all dealing with discordant energies. We're dealing with family members, friends, coworkers that are going in and out of being energy vampires, voluntarily, involuntarily, usually unconsciously. What I've come to find with my clientele, as I am working with students and also with my coaching clientele, and Karen, I know you're going to be able to corroborate this, when you find the recordings that bring you into a state of consistent, balanced, harmonic breath and a resonance in the room, particularly also for those that are going to sleep. We all know we're dealing in a soup of dark energy, you know, those things that we can't necessarily see, but that we are definitely being impacted by. I've come to find that having maybe sacred womb in the cosmic womb. Thank you. See, you know, I've got so many recordings in my head. You're going to have to be patient with me, Karen. But if I'm listening to that all day long and I'm at my computer and I'm writing, I'm doing blogs, I'm writing a book, I am in such a beautiful state of lucidity and what I would call divine data download. For mothers that have children that are very intuitive and they can feel some of the thinness between the veils, and sometimes things are frightening them because there are real things that we don't see in that 95% dark energy, dark matter space. We shift the vibration in the room by playing it, even if they don't have a headset on, just having the frequency perhaps of sacred lullaby or of light body or whatever your particular sacred acoustics jam for the evening happens to be. It changes the vibrational frequency in the room, so it is not a match for dark energies. It's not a match for the arguments that's still lingering in the air. It's not even a match for the child's fear. It brings their energy back up, and you end up creating this beautifully transcendent space to sleep in. And so I'm excited by the fact that just having it playing, whether you are listening to the headset or not, actually changes the vibrational frequency and resonance of wherever we happen to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful that you're using them in that fashion. That's so wonderful. Yes, Cosmic Womb was created when Kevin's wife was giving birth in their third floor Manhattan apartment.
Oh, wow.
In a rented birthing tub.
What a great story. Now, can you talk to our viewers a little bit about Sacred Lullaby? It's very unique. It's different from all the other recordings, and I know that there's a story behind it, and we're already wrapping up on the hour. I don't know how that happened, but I want to touch on that real quickly if we can, Karen.
Okay. Well, Sacred Lullaby, Kevin he and I are about the same age. We sometimes laughing anyway. We're about the same age, but I have a daughter who's 30 and just had her own baby in December. So I just became a grandmother.
Oh, congratulations. You're going to be smitten for life, I guarantee you.
I am already. And Kevin, though, just started having babies. Mm-hmm. And so he had a new baby who is now about 2.5 years old. And then he had another one last summer who is almost a year, I guess. Yeah, almost a year in June. And at any rate, when the first baby was born, he was like any father, you know, when he had to take care of his child and he cried, he didn't want him to cry. And so he wanted to make a recording to help his child fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned hearing like a sound. That is actually a shower, mm-hmm. because he found that when he would walk with his baby into the bathroom when the shower was going, he would immediately calm down.
Yes.
So there's a shower sound on there. There is Catherine, the mother, Kevin's wife, singing. She has the most absolute angelic voice.
She does.
Absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. So we were so fortunate to get this beautiful recording of her singing to her child. And she was singing I love you over and over again, but you will not hear I love you in the sound because she wasn't using her words. Mm-hmm. She was using her feelings to say I love you while she sang that song. And then we added one in the background is it sounds like a harmonium, that it's a delta signal. And this is actually the one recording that can very easily be played on an iPhone speaker and still have rather effective results. And mm-hmm. because he designed it specifically so that his wife and he could play it off their iPhone very conveniently. And I know my own daughter played it very frequently while she was pregnant, and it helped her go to sleep at night. And her mm-hmm. baby now loves it as well. Mm-hmm. And Cosmic Womb and Sacred Lullaby then became our first very specific children products. And we hope to have more as Kevin's children and my now grandchild get a little older, I'm sure we'll come up with further inspiration to help children, maybe especially at night, children who have nightmares and things like that, to really help them get into that calm space so they feel safe when they go to sleep at night. Because as you said, it is very common for children to have those thin veils, and it can sometimes be disconcerting. Certain children have more nightmares than others, so it'd be very nice to help them. We are also in the middle of a pilot study with a psychiatrist in New York who's helping people who are suffering from anxiety, depression, focus issues, and insomnia. And of course, in our Western world, pharmaceutical drugs help all of those conditions for some, or at least they're prescribed for those conditions. And this particular psychiatrist is interested in helping people really go within to start solving their problems more wholly than just taking a pill to mask symptoms. And we're seeing amazing results. Some of her toughest nuts to crack are finding that the sounds are helping them in ways that are just surprising them. People sometimes listen and they just get calmer, they're more relaxed, they find that neutral observer inside, and they're able to view their problems on a whole other level. They're able to focus better. It's, you know, I hate to come off as some kind of snake oil salesman, you know, like these tones can do everything. It's not just the tones, it's the person listening, and you must have, you know, some intention and some purpose if you want to see some good results. And it really is a marriage of people being empowered to take this on for themselves and not just have someone else tell them what they should do or what they can take to solve their problems. Now, we write about this. I co-authored Eben Alexander's third book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and we have a chapter for those who are very interested in this sacred acoustics. We have a chapter called Riding the Wave of Consciousness, chapter 9. And in this chapter, Dr. Alexander talks about his own experiences with the sound, but I also bring in, through his voice, the beginnings of sacred acoustics and some stories with Kevin and how we use these tones in our workshops to really help people expand beyond the daily here and now.
Yes, and very effectively too. I recognize that as much as you're not over promoting here, and you're not, and I'm going to ask you to direct your audience, our audience, to more to Sacred Acoustics and its offerings and some of the packages and bundles, because that's really what we're about. We recognize more and more, Karen, this is what we've been coming at and sharing with all of our guests and our audience during this time of human evolution and during this time of understanding that there is the potential for ascension. There's another place that we can go that is recognizing what quantum physics is finally agreeing with, you know, the esoteric wisdom that we've been hearing since the beginning. We are resonant beings. The universe is about wave and frequency. These sounds are actually a complement to and a very beautiful synthesis of bringing us back into a place of maybe some spiritual and resonant homeostasis as far as I'm concerned. And when that happens, the breath changes. When the breath changes, we've got a place for some of that balance in our neurochemistry, in our body's physiology. It makes perfect sense that it can be a complement at the level that we've been discussing, and yes, affect every facet of what we're experiencing on a spiritual, mind, emotional, and a physiological level. And so I do want to get our folks back to where you would be directing them for looking at sacredacoustics.com and maybe some of the bundles. We've got a lot of people interested in Ascension here. We've got a lot of people interested in transcendent state. So what would you be recommending for them at this point, Karen?
Well, first go to sacredacoustics.com and you can try it out very simply by entering your email on our free download page, and we will send you a link to a free file, a 20-minute file that for some people, that's all they need. Now, if you're like Tatiana and me and Eben and you want to explore further, we have so many different sounds. And yes, Ascension Bundle is something that Tatiana actually handpicked the recordings to go into that bundle. And I must say she selected a very nice collection. I don't think rattling them off now would be helpful. But if you go to the site and look at our bundles page, you'll see that we include samples, little short 1-minute samples for every recording we have. So you can try for yourself before making any purchase. And we have another page called I Want To. And so if you have a particular goal and you don't know where to start, go to that page. Of course, if you're interested in Ascension, the Ascension bundle is a wonderful value, a really great value. What is it, 5? I think it's 5 different CDs in that bundle. And so when you buy in a bundle, you save about 25% of the cost of the individual recordings. And we have a bunch of different bundles: creativity, health, transformation, ascension, exploration. They all have kind of slightly different flavors. There's also a collection of videos we call our training series, so that you can learn kind of the common concerns and different ways to use them.
Gosh, Karen, honestly, I don't know how an hour goes by this quickly. You hear people say this all the time, but let me tell you, it just happens to be true. When you've got this much exciting information to be able to share and tools that really can be furthering us in such a profound and exponential way, we could go on for quite a while. You've been so generous with your time. I'm telling my wonderful, dutiful Solutionary TV audience, these are profoundly transformative tools. I use them every day. I refer them every day to my clientele. My students work with them, and where you are able to go is literally outside of what might feel like the confines of the density of your physiology. You can travel the cosmos, you can experience the multiverses, and you can just go deep inside yourself and be cradled in the womb of a cooing mother that will speak to you at a level that is really hard to describe. There's a familiarity in so many of these sounds that have been put together that will remind you of being so much more than just the avatar, the character that you're playing right now. It is like returning to yourself. And so, Karen, thank you for joining us tonight. Like I said, we could go on forever. We may just have to have you come back again and share more about where the work is deepening. Would you be interested in sharing?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much for inviting me and for being such a proud advocate of our work. It's humbling, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Well, I am grateful for the tools in ways that are hard to describe. So it is a win-win for both of us. And I just want to say to our audience, thank you for remembering that we are so much more than we've been told. Thank you for having the critical thinking skills and the questioning of authority, and now getting out of the cognitive dissonance that so much of society has been stuck in for some time, and realizing there's so much hope to all of the solutions that are available to us. Please continue to support Solutionary TV as we are supporting you in your exponential growth and your return to the empowered self that you are, because together we are the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.